And we're back. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Record Live. We'll just wait for a few more people to jump on. Thank you for regularly tuning in, for all of our regulars. We love you guys, and we're very excited about the community we're building here. And today we have another very interesting and very relevant discussion. It's on women in ministry and sort of the challenges and also the beautiful things about that. And today we are joined by the wonderful Dr. Danijela Schubert from the South Pacific Division. Danijela, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me to come.
Oh, it's an honor to have you. So Danijela, obviously women in ministry, big topic. There's a lot of things we could talk about in that. And it's a topic that's close to my heart, being a woman, not directly in ministry, but a woman, sort of working for the church, doing ministry through my work. But before we sort of get into the nitty gritty of everything, do you want to just introduce yourself and what your role is at the South Pacific Division?
I work as a member of Discipleship Ministries team, and my specific area is women's ministry and women in ministry.
Can you, I was going to ask you that question, Danijela, to break that difference down for us, because a lot of people, when they hear, a lot of people would be familiar with women's ministries at a local church level, at perhaps even a conference level. Their local conference might have a women's ministries representative. But I've seen your title around as women in ministry, and that's different. You've just specified that you're in those two different areas, women's ministries and women in ministries. There's a tiny two-letter word in the middle, but what's that important distinction? What's the difference? What are we talking about here?
Excuse my cat.
Oh, beautiful.
Everyone will be happy to see the cat.
Hello.
Oh, very nice.
I love it.
So the difference between women's ministry and women in ministry is that women in ministry, generally we say they are women pastors, women who are employed in church administration, in departmental work, while women's ministry is for any women in the church, and I guess outside the church too. So women's ministry is kind of a big umbrella, and women in ministry in a way would be part of it, but women's ministry is not concerned about women's ordination and doesn't want to be connected with that or fight for that. So it's more general, more broad, for women education, women literacy, for against abuse of women and other topics, while women in ministry is mostly for women who have finished theological education and are really working in ministry.
A question on women in ministry that just sprung to mind. Do you know the proportion of women versus men pastors in our church in the South Pacific? Like, what's the ratio there? Or do you not know? I'm sorry if it's a...
I do know. You did catch me a little bit off guard because I did not prepare that.
Sorry. That's fine.
I can find the information, but it's because I do have it. I just didn't think about looking at it, and I don't.
Didn't prepare you for this, so it's okay.
Just give me a moment, and I'll tell you. Women in ministry, so proportion in pastoral women ministry, so we have 5%.
5%. Okay. Wow.
So this is across the South Pacific Division. If you look at just Australian Union Conference, 10% are women.
Okay.
So quite a big difference. NZPUC, we have 5%. In PNGUM, it's 3%. And TPUM also 3%.
Okay.
Yeah, so altogether 5% are women.
What are the main reasons for that disparity there? I mean, a lot of things come to mind, but just coming from you, why maybe women, why would they be hesitant to enter ministry, or why is there only 5 or 10%?
Well, it has been a long while, coming. And because of some changes that happen in the policy of the church, that has discouraged, I suppose, women from entering to ministry. But there is more women in our schools. I think Avondale has had quite a lot of women apply. Not as well represented in the Pacific.
Yeah.
But we have quite a lot of women. So let's say in Papua New Guinea, there is 26 women, while in AUC 35.
Okay.
So it's growing there too, number of women, but in Pacific, maybe cultural also issues are having an impact there too. We have some policies issues, both there and here, that need to be addressed, and all of that, contributes to why women maybe would be hesitant.
Absolutely.
Now, Danijela, a question I see quite often on our website or on articles that we post when we mention women who are doing ministry in the church. Sometimes it's the good things they're doing and all that, but there's often trolls who jump on and say, it can be unrelated actually to women in ministry at all, but they're like, our division is out of policy, out of step with, God, or out of step with the church, etc. My understanding is that our division is within the policy. We haven't done anything particularly that sets us at odds with what the current recommendations and rules of the church are. So can you unpack that a little bit and explain perhaps how, as the SPD, we're working in that space, but we are actually, staying within policy as it stands as the church at the moment?
Yes, so in our division, we are in agreement with the church policy. So we have not stepped out. We would like to. Because the church, the administration in our division affirms women and wants to see more women in pastoral ministry, more women in leadership, and we officially believe that ordination is not a biblical concept. So it's not in the Bible. The Bible does not say thou shalt ordain or not ordain women. It is a policy. It's a church policy. But so if we could change the church policy, we would, but we are still waiting for the world church to do that. So, I'm thinking of 2015 GC session, and how we could have voted to allow divisions to make that decision. And I think that if it was voted yes, confirming that, that probably at the first executive committee meeting, our division would have voted that through for our division, because they are for that, but nevertheless, they want to be in line with the general conference policy. So yes, I hope that clarifies a bit this question.
Well, I think there's myths or falsehoods floating around, that the division, because they support women in ministry, means that they're out of policy or that they're in some ways apostate, or but it's not true. And I think it's important to clarify that, to point that out.
Actually, we even have a lot of work to do to be within the policy, because women elders could be ordained, and yet we have many women elders who are not ordained. And we have women in pastoral work who could be elders and who could be ordained, but they are not yet. So we have a lot to do to even be within the policy now. We are lagging behind.
Interesting.
I'm hoping that this year is the year that we are going to commission many women and have many of them elders ordained. Yes.
Amazing. Just a point of clarification for those who are listening who may not know the difference. What is the difference between being commissioned as a pastor or minister and being ordained? What difference is there in what you can do?
There is a very little difference between the two.
Okay.
So there are 3 points in the policy that have a difference between the two, but generally it is all the same. And now it's really just 2 different words used for the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. But there are 3 minor differences in what you can do if you're ordained pastor as compared to commissioned.
Okay. And those things, I've heard something like it's like baptism, is it, or marriage or something, like ordained pastors can,
No, both of those commissioned pastor can do. They cannot start a new church as a organized church. They cannot disband, and they cannot what was the third one? They cannot officiate at ordination service. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow, they are small differences.
But they can baptize, they can marry, and
Wow. Okay.
officiate at Lord's Supper and other things. Yeah.
But they also can't be president because you have to be ordained.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes.
So there's some differences in then the implementation. So the difference between a pastor who's commissioned and a pastor who's ordained is quite small, but then other parts of church policy, I think.
Yes, that's true. So the only role that a commissioned pastor cannot have is to be a president. They can be a CFO, they can be a secretary, but not a president. For president in the GC policy, it says that it has to be an ordained pastor and therefore a man.
Right. So the women in ministry role then of support and what kind of things are you helping women leaders in the church with? What sort of support are they needing? What sort of development work are you doing in that space? What does your department or your role, I guess is more accurate, look like?
Yes. Well, there is a lot of different areas. Women in ministry has a committee at the division. So Women in Ministry Advisory Committee, and we meet twice a year and we discuss different topics and needs of women. And then we try and do something in that regard. So one of the big things that we have done was last year we organized a conference for women in ministry, and we had women from all over the division come and have some time together. That was after 10 years. We got women together. So that was a very big thing. And the division supported very much financially. So that's one way of doing that, supporting them, promoting. We have advised changes to the policy that are needed. And due to the work of that committee, we asked General Conference to put on the agenda again women's ordination issue. Well, that was rejected, but that's something we're trying to do. Then we advise administration in church on how to deal with women, what things to do. I remember sending emails to administrators across the division, telling them, "Can you please include this kind of statement when you preach, so that they can be a voice for women and maybe not so not telling them off, but having as part of the conversation, just drop those lines so that people will get used to hearing about how valuable women are and why we need women in the church leadership and so on. So different ways of approaching different segments of the church in order to help women in ministry. Another simple way, we have written handwritten cards to every single woman in ministry and sent it by mail, and they really appreciate it, just a token of appreciation that way.
That's lovely. So Danijela, how did you land in your role? I'd be interested to know, because I know you haven't pastored a church yourself, and sort of like your journey into the role and what you love about it and sort of the purpose that you find in the role. I'd be interested to hear.
Yes, that's something I could be talking for a while.
Spark Notes version.
So my initial interest in studying theology, studying Bible, was when I was still a teenager, and I wanted to find out what is it that I believe. I simply just wanted to learn more about the Bible. And at that time, ladies who completed this course used to work as secretaries in some offices, and I wasn't interested in that at all. And then when I got married with my husband, we went to the Philippines, and that's where I started my theology master's degree. And once I started that, this idea of working for church started to develop more. And so the classes that I was taking, I was thinking, what are the classes that are needed back in that school? Because I just assumed we will go back and that's where we are going to work. But we never went back. we came to Australia instead. But like courses that I remember, I just loved taking those courses. And I had opportunity to choose were especially Greek and Hebrew. I really wanted to learn the original languages. And in the first school that I went to for Bible diploma, women were not allowed to take those classes. It was male ones. They could take Greek and Hebrew, but we ladies, we had to learn how to cook and sew and take care of kids. Those were other subjects that we took instead of Greek and Hebrew, and I wanted to study Greek and Hebrew.
Wow.
Wow, so your journey was very intentional. You sort of had to push back at the culture and the status quo a bit.
Yeah, and then once, like when we came to Australia, I worked as a pastor's wife, really. We were partners in ministry. Of course, women in those days, in those roles, were not paid. But certainly my husband and I worked together as a team. And then once we went to Pakistan, he was asked to be a missionary there. Within a year, I started working for the church because there was just so much need, and I had the qualification, and that's where I started to teach in School of Theology there, and then I continued that in Papua New Guinea. So I was lecturing, and that was interesting because I was, I think, the first woman to teach theology there. And like in Pakistan, I was in charge of the theology department, and I remember the AAA commission came, and one of their recommendations was change the woman. A woman cannot be chairing this religion department. But okay.
Wow.
Goodness. Wow. So you were there, and then they're just like, oh, actually, no. Like, because that has nothing to do with your merit or your skill or like the path you've taken to get there. It's purely a discrimination thing. So
Yeah, it was amazing. I remember that conversation with the commission, and the surprise in the eyes of those men that they are seeing in front of themselves a woman who is in charge of religion department. They were like, it can't be.
Yeah, yeah. So
Man.
you, even not pastoring like directly at church, you know, you've experienced some of this discrimination, I suppose, that women face. Bringing it to today and like an Australian or Pacific Island context, what are some of the common prejudices that you see against women in ministry, and sort of like what can we do to help or change that?
Well, I guess you are aware of what are the prejudices against women. It has really to do with how you understand the Bible, and how you interpret the Bible. Yeah, you know, everybody who reads the Bible, we all have our own glasses that we put on. It's our background. It's how we grew up. That's how we understand the Bible. And sometimes that's how we interpret it. And sometimes we can be so adamant that we are right, and this is the only way to understand things. And that's where you can have those kind of issues pop up. Often it's, I think, just our way of understanding things. And we need to have a broader view of what God is doing and what God wants to do, and what is God's kingdom like.
Yeah.
And I think that will help clear those issues.
What sort of have, in your experience, have you seen that it's important, the sort of skills and the sort of point of difference that women in leadership can actually bring? What are we missing out on as a church by restricting some of those roles to women? What have you experienced and witnessed in your time that it helps to have more in the ordained priesthood, or even pastorhood, or just the general church leadership roles, treasurers, accountants, principals, all sorts of leadership roles in the church?
Yes, I think if we don't have a good mix between men and women, we simply don't have a full picture of the needs, a full picture of what we could do to make it better, because God created us to be male and female, and together we are supposed to work in every area of our life. And only when we work together, we will have the full benefit of who we are as people. Only then we are going to really show people who God is, because we are missing something otherwise. And it would be the same, if we had only women in leadership, then we would miss the male side, which is so important. And so likewise, if we have only males, well, we are missing female perspective. And all the nations and organizations that have balanced that have more women in leadership, they are better organizations. They function better. The nations are better. They're more prosperous. So there are great benefits to have both women and men in leadership, and we need to seek to do that. And we have to be intentional. We cannot just leave it be, because if we just leave it be, it won't happen. It's not part of the normal thing yet. I hope that one day this will be normal. But at the moment, we still need to have some policies. We need to have some goals. We need to be intentional in preparing women to take those roles where decisions are made, because we will make better decisions. And I believe we will fulfill mission of the church better if we have both genders engaged fully.
Absolutely. And what you were saying, it reminded me of because I think sometimes the conception or the misconception is that women need extra training in order to do the same job as a man does, or women, like, they're somehow less than, and we need to, like, they're like man's helper, as Genesis describes Eve, as Adam's helper. And I'm sure this, being a doctor in theology. The word for helper in Genesis is actually Azer. I'm not sure how it's exactly pronounced, but the meaning behind it is the woman helps the man do the things that he can't do himself. So it's not as though we're just like, passing a tool from the toolbox. Like, we bring our own toolbox of tools that the man doesn't have. And I think, that's so important what you say with that equal representation, because if a school is 50% females and 50% males, and hopefully you have 50% females and males on the board of that school or whatever, to, as you say, equally represent. So no, definitely. What are some of the you mentioned training and sort of helping women to get into those roles. What do you mean by that? Like, what are some things that could be done there?
Well, we could bring the story of women more to younger people. In schools. We need to have more women speakers at events, so that younger people can see that this is a possibility. And there was somebody who told me a story which I thought was hilarious and great. There was a little boy who was listening to a female pastor, and he was intently looking, and this woman said to him, men can also be pastors.
Love it.
I thought that's great.
Yeah.
Because usually, we have a completely the other way around.
It's the other way, yeah.
Yes.
I have an interesting question, and maybe it's not a simple answer. We've often tied the idea of ministry in the church to a sense of calling. We very much spiritualize it. So we say that God has called the pastors. And so some people might think, well, hang on, if there's 98% of pastors that are male in a direction, is that because God's not calling as many women as he is men? Are there barriers that are stopping the women from doing that? What's the Holy Spirit's involvement in that? So you talk about intentionally building the numbers of women leaders and women's pastors. Is it a tragic case of these women have been called but have had to be pushed into other areas, or they're not feeling the same sense of calling? Or are we over spiritualizing the choice to become a pastor by occupation? Or is there something else going on? And it might just be your opinion. You may not have, statistics, but if you've got some anecdotes or some thoughts to share on that, I'd be really curious to see what you think.
Yeah, I know that God is calling both men and women, but some women just have to choose something else. So many women who really passionately believe they should be pastors, they're going to chaplains instead, because family doesn't want them, or the society where they live doesn't want them. You have women in Pacific countries also who finish theology degrees and they want to be pastors. They're not picked up as pastors, but they are put in departmental area. So there is many more women who could be in pastoral area, but they are not because of other things. So women say, okay, God, you have called me. I will do whatever. I know I'm passionate about ministry, but I will do wherever the doors open. Maybe 20 years ago, roughly, I think, few people here in Australia got together to form a Women in Ministry Trust to get money together so that they will give money to the conference to pay for female pastor. Because that was one excuse always, we have no money for people. So
we can't put extra people on because we don't have any money.
So they were giving money to the conferences to employ pastors, and hopefully by now, there is enough money and there is enough goodwill to see how much good the women are doing as pastors that now it's part of the budget. to have both. But these are just some examples of why some women then did not end up being in pastoral ministry, although they feel the call that God has placed on their heart.
We have a couple of comments here from everyone watching. Nick Cross says, great to see you lifting up women in leadership, Danijela Schubert. And we've got like a bunch of love hearts here of support. So this is obviously a topic that resonates with people. We also have a question here from John Reynolds. Well, it's just a statement, but I think he probably phrases it as a question. And it says, the Bible says women should not teach. Now, this is a common argument used, against women in ministry and that sort of thing. Maybe this is a topic that's, like one of those Bible study kind of topics you need to really sit down with someone. But do you have anything to say in response to that, for or against?
I would say that texts like that one need to be looked in the context. We should do the proper hermeneutics of that text. And I think if we do that, it will become clear what the text originally meant for the original audience, and then we can apply it to today. I personally believe that it doesn't mean that women cannot teach in the church. Actually, we have most women teachers. So if they can teach in the school, why can't they teach in the church?
Interesting double standard. Yeah.
Well, maybe children aren't really men or aren't humans yet. In that perspective. There's this common sort of theme, and someone's mentioned it in our comments, that Ellen White was called only after a man refused the call. But I recall I've been reading through the Bible this year, and I was in Judges recently, and sort of the story of Deborah and Barak, the story of how Barak basically says, I'm not going if you're not coming with me. It wasn't so much the case that he was called afterwards. He was told sort of this is what's happening, and he was okay to do that. But Deborah sort of pushed back and said, well, because you're making this statement, you're not going to get the glory for that. Another woman is going to be involved in actually taking down sort of Israel's enemy. But she was very much the judge, the leader, the prophetess. There's a number of titles given to her in the Old Testament, but she was this very strong female character in a host of male violent men in the Judges period, where everyone did what was right in their own eyes and didn't follow God. Deborah sort of stood up for God and his kingdom, and I don't get the sense from that biblical text, at least, that a man was called and rejected the call, and so God sort of just said, oh well, you can do it, because I guess there were plenty of other men in Israel at the time. So yeah. I'm not sure if I have a question on that, but I'm just putting it out there.
Another interesting prophetess in the Bible is Huldah, and she was contemporary, I believe, of Isaiah and few other prophets. And yet when king wanted something, you can read that in Old Testament, he actually went and asked for her to come and give him clarification. So that's another interesting one in the Bible. That there could have been other men, but no, he chose a woman, and she came and gave him the advice, and he listened to the advice.
Danijela, we like to be practical on Record Live. We always like to leave with practical advice to people, and I guess I'm wondering if you have any advice for young women wanting to enter ministry. You said there's been an influx recently, which is great. But yeah, what are some of the ways that they should prepare themselves, maybe mentally, for the task, or there's some skills that they should have, or maybe they feel called, but they're not sure. What would you say?
I would say, with God, you can do everything. Don't worry about what people are saying. Just go for it if you feel the call of God. And in reality, anything that you do in life well, with passion and conviction, there will be people who will be against, and you will have to stand up for what you are doing. And I think the same is in ministry. I had an interesting situation about 10 years ago, 12 almost. I attended another women in ministry conference here in Australia. And I remember there were some very young women who came to that conference, who just started theology, or maybe first or second year theology. And then we had one of the conversations where women who already worked as pastors for a while share their burdens and what issues they encountered, and there were some conversations that were really heavy, and I went, oh my goodness, this young woman, she's just going to leave and forget about ministry. I was really worried about her, and the reaction was completely the opposite. Oh, I want to do this. Yeah, and she is still in ministry 10 years later. It's like, just go for it. If God is calling you, God will find a way. It won't be easy, but you will feel fulfilled in what you are doing. Yeah.
10 years on from that little girl, becoming a woman and a pastor and everything. I mean, I guess I'm just talking about the age. At that age, you're probably starting to have kids and trying to juggle a family and full-time ministry and that sort of thing. Do you see women struggle in that balance? Is it a difficulty? Is it a challenge, or is it actually an asset? Like, what do you typically see?
I think it makes it a bit difficult for women. I know that women usually want to continue work, but the church administrators tend to think, at least some of them, that if a woman has a child, well, she is no longer going to work. She will now just look after the children. But that's not the case. I think many women want to come back, but they want to have that flexibility. And so as a church, we need to make sure that the policies have that flexibility in, and that we provide for them. For example, a woman may need to have a place to go and express milk during the meetings. Well, that's not a need that a man has. So it's specific to women, and it would be good for administration to think about that. How can we make work in church for female pastors something exciting? How can we allow them to, while going through different stages in life, still have a great contribution in ministry? And there is a way to do that. So let's remove some of those obstacles, and let's embrace women in what they offer to the church.
Absolutely.
You had some really good practical advice, I guess, for young women who are thinking about or feel like they have a calling in that space. What about some practical advice for local churches and even the church? Like, what would you like to say to the church as myself as a layperson or as part of the body of Christ, as well as like some of the local churches, and how can we facilitate women in leadership, women in ministry in a better or more holistic way?
I would say, let's be more curious, if anything. Let's be more curious about what difference women make. You can see some videos that are available online in North American division, where somebody has followed up the church who didn't want to have a woman, but somehow they got a woman as a pastor, and through time with that pastor, what has changed and why it has changed. And those churches were just amazed to see what work a woman does, and many times they go an extra mile and think like, how could we live before without female pastor? They just make such a huge difference. So let's be curious. Let's not be judgmental, and let's not be stopping women. Let's give them opportunities, and let's see what God is going to do with them in our churches.
Wow. Well, Danijela, I guess like kind of running out of time, so we're coming to the end, but just as like a closing thought, what would be your ideal vision for the church moving forward in the space of women's ministries and women in ministry? You know, what would you like your legacy to be, I suppose?
Yes, I would like to see that having women in leadership, having women in ministry is something that is normal, something that we don't need to talk about, something that we don't need to make policies about. It's simply a normal way of life. That's what I would like to see.
I love that. Simple, to the point, difficult, but it's a good vision statement, definitely. Yeah. Well, Jared, do you have any last thoughts or questions? Or?
I'm just taking it all in, Mariella, and I'm enjoying learning from two wise women.
One wise woman, one learning. How about that?
Thank you so much, Danijela, for joining us today. It's been really good to chat with you and to hear a few more of those perspectives. I guess, growing up in the church, I can't remember a time we ever had a woman pastor in my local church. So, these days, obviously, I've interacted with more women in leadership and in ministry in the church, and I've seen some of the works and things that they are able to do. But yeah, it is something that hopefully is changing and is progressing. And as you say, we need to stay curious, and if we haven't had that experience before, go seek out and have more conversations with people that are different or may even have different opinions to us, and find a way forward to, basically the goal is that we're unified as the body of Christ, isn't it? That we're all on the same mission, that we're all spreading the three angels' messages and talking about the good news of Jesus. We're all on the same team. So why don't we want more workers in the field? That's the bottom line.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Danijela. It's great to chat with you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And for everyone watching at home or wherever you are, maybe you're traveling home at the moment, thank you for joining us. And we will see you again next week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.